The doors to the hospital swung shut behind Julian with a hollow, echoing thud, cutting off the sterile hum of the emergency room. He stood still for a moment, a cold sweat clinging to his skin, his heart pounding in his chest. His thoughts were a blur, clouded with panic and disbelief. His fingers trembled as they gripped the edge of the doorframe, the sound of the world around him muffling as if everything had gone into slow motion. His wife, Emily, the woman he had loved for so long, lay unconscious in a hospital bed just a few floors above. She had been there for days, fighting a battle no one could win. And now, the doctors had confirmed what Julian had feared the most: it was too late. There was nothing they could do. He had it all, the wealth, the luxury, the status. But none of it had mattered in the face of this. He could feel it deep inside him, a sharp ache in his chest that grew with each passing second. He wasn't just losing his wife, he was losing his reason to keep going. Without her, everything felt meaningless. Julian could barely remember how he had gotten there. He had been pacing the corridors, speaking to specialists, making calls, trying to find someone, anyone, who could offer a solution. But they all spoke in soft, regretful tones. "We've done everything we can," they said. "It's just a matter of time now." The weight of those words felt like a crushing blow to his ribs, each syllable pushing him deeper into despair. He couldn't understand it. A woman who had been so full of life, so full of dreams, had been reduced to a shell. He had stood by her side for so long, watching her fight against an illness that had no mercy. Now, he was watching the light in her eyes slowly fade away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The tears that had threatened to spill since the moment he stepped into the hospital began to fall. Julian wiped his eyes quickly, not wanting to appear vulnerable, even though he felt like his whole world was crumbling. His mind swirled with desperate thoughts. There had to be a way to fix this, didn't there? He wasn't ready to say goodbye. Not yet. Not ever. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, and began walking toward the exit. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered above him as he passed through the sterile hallway, the clicking of his shoes the only sound in the silence. He couldn't shake the feeling of heaviness pressing on him, the weight of impending loss suffocating him with each step. He had hoped, no, prayed that today wouldn't be the day. But it was. It was, and nothing would ever be the same again. As he approached the exit, a voice interrupted his thoughts, pulling him from the dark pit of despair. "Excuse me, sir, are you all right?" Julian's steps faltered. His gaze flicked to the source of the voice, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if he was hearing things. Standing a few feet away, just by the entrance, was a young woman. She was out of place in this pristine, polished hospital environment. Her clothes were tattered, and her face bore the marks of a life lived in hardship. A faint dusting of dirt clung to her cheeks, and her eyes, those eyes, were piercing, as though she had seen things that no one else could possibly imagine. Julian blinked, trying to make sense of her presence. He didn't have the energy for a conversation, not now. Not with everything weighing down on him. He didn't even answer her at first, too caught up in the turmoil inside his mind to process what was happening. But the woman didn't back away. She stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "You don't look okay," she continued, taking a step closer. "What happened?" Julian swallowed hard, anger rising in his chest. Who was she to ask? Why was she even here, in this place? Didn't she see the pain etched on his face, the brokenness that threatened to consume him? "I'm fine," Julian muttered through gritted teeth, not wanting to look at her any longer. He turned to leave, his head spinning. He had enough to deal with already. But then, the woman's voice stopped him in his tracks. "You can save her. I know how." Julian froze. He spun around, his heart beating faster now, his breath shallow. "What?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "How could you possibly know anything about my wife?" Her calmness didn't falter. She looked at him with an air of quiet confidence, like she knew something he didn't. Because I'm the reason she's still alive. The words hit him like a slap to the face. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. She was crazy. She had to be. How could she know anything about his wife? How could anyone claim something like that? Are you some kind of scam artist? Julian spat, his anger flaring. Just another person looking to take advantage of someone like me? The woman didn't flinch, didn't show the slightest sign of fear. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice low and steady. I'm not here to scam you. I'm here because I can help. Julian felt a rush of confusion. This was madness. But as he looked into her eyes, something stopped him from dismissing her entirely. There was an intensity there, a strange knowing that made him pause. Something about her words, her calm demeanor, struck a chord in him. Was there a chance, even the smallest chance, that she might be telling the truth? Tell me how, Julian said, his voice barely above a whisper. He was no longer sure if he was speaking from hope or desperation, but he had to know. The woman studied him for a moment before answering. You need to come with me. There's no time to explain here. Julian's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what to think. Could he really trust this stranger? Could he trust anything in a world where his wife's life was slipping away and there was nothing he could do to stop it? Why should I follow you? Julian asked, his voice cracking slightly. Because I'm the only one who can save her, she said, as though the answer was simple, as though it were already settled. You don't have much time. We have to act now. Julian glanced back toward the hospital, the sterile walls and the sounds of machines beeping in the distance. The fear gripped him once again. But there was something in her eyes, something in the way she spoke that made him feel like he had nothing to lose. He had no choice but to follow her. His legs felt heavy as he walked beside her, each step carrying him further into the unknown. They exited the hospital together, the crisp air outside a sharp contrast to the cold inside. Julian couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing a threshold he couldn't return from, but he had no other option. The girl had promised him something he hadn't dared to hope for, the chance to save Emily. As they walked into the darkening evening, Julian could feel the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders. He didn't know who this woman was or how she could possibly have any answers, but he had to find out. His wife's life hung in the balance. And for the first time since he'd entered that hospital, he felt a flicker of something deep inside him, hope. Julian followed the girl through the narrow alley, his mind racing. Every step felt like a decision that could change everything. The weight of the night's events pressed down on him, making his chest tighten with every breath. His thoughts raced from the events at the hospital to the strange woman by his side. Why did he trust her? He had no answers to that question, but the urgency in her voice, the calm certainty in her eyes, had driven him to act. He had been living in a world of helplessness and hopelessness for days now, waiting for the inevitable to happen. But now, there was a flicker of something else, something that felt like hope. He glanced at the woman, noticing the way her clothes clung to her thin frame. They were torn and dirty, a stark contrast to the pristine, high-end suits he was used to wearing. She moved with an ease that belied her ragged appearance, almost as if she were used to walking through places like this. The evening sky above them had darkened, the stars barely visible through the smog, and the city's noises seemed to fade as they ventured deeper into the backstreets. Where are we going? Julian asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his mind screamed for answers. And how do you know about Emily? The girl didn't answer immediately. She walked a little faster, her steps quickening, then stopped to turn and face him. Her eyes locked with his, and Julian felt the air around him chill slightly. It was as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. You don't need to know everything right now, she said softly. Just trust me. Julian was about to protest, but she raised her hand, cutting him off. You've been trying to find a way to save her. You've been looking for help everywhere. The doctors, the specialists, they've told you there's no hope left, haven't they? He nodded, biting his lip as the truth hit him again like a wave. He had searched for any possibility, any tiny chance that someone could work a miracle. But every lead had ended in dead ends. They've told me that she's dying, he said in a strained whisper. And you're telling me you can save her? The woman studied him carefully. There was no sympathy in her eyes, no softening of her expression. It was as if she had seen this pain before and didn't need to offer comfort. Her only focus was on what lay ahead. Not I, she said cryptically. But I know someone who can. Julian felt a shiver run through him, and for a moment, he wondered if he was making a mistake. Should he turn back now? Should he ignore this strange girl and return to the hospital? His mind screamed to go back, but his heart, and the flicker of hope she had ignited, kept him moving forward. She led him down a few more darkened streets, and soon the sounds of the city began to fade. It was as if they had left the heart of the bustling metropolis behind, entering a quieter, more secretive part of town. The houses around them grew older, more decrepit, with cracked windows and peeling paint. The further they walked, the more the feeling of unease began to build in Julian's chest. Where exactly are we going? He asked again, trying to make sense of it all. The girl didn't look at him but kept walking, her pace unhurried. To someone who knows how to help. She's the only one. The only one? Julian asked. His frustration was creeping back in. You can't just tell me who this person is? Why all the mystery? If you're really trying to help me, why can't you just say what's going on? The girl stopped suddenly, causing Julian to nearly crash into her. She turned and looked at him, her eyes cold and distant. I told you to trust me. You asked for help, and I'm giving it to you. That's all you need to know. Her tone was final, leaving no room for argument. Julian opened his mouth to protest, but then thought better of it. He was desperate. He had no choice but to trust her, whether he liked it or not. They continued down the street in silence, and after a few more minutes, they reached an old, nondescript building that looked out of place in the area. It was a tall, narrow structure with a faded wooden door and dim lights spilling through the windows. Julian could make out the faint outline of a sign, but the writing was too worn to read clearly. The girl led him up a set of worn, creaking stairs, and they entered through the door without a word. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and incense, the dim light casting long shadows against the walls. Julian's eyes adjusted to the low light as he looked around. The room was sparsely decorated, no frills, just bare essentials. There were a few tables, scattered chairs, and shelves filled with old books and trinkets that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. At the far end of the room, a woman sat at a large wooden desk. She was older than the girl, maybe in her late 40s, with long dark hair streaked with gray. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and alert, as if she had seen and experienced more than anyone should. She looked up when they entered and gave a small, knowing smile, but her gaze lingered on Julian for a moment longer than it should have. You brought him, the older woman said in a low voice, her tone rich with authority. The girl nodded, stepping aside to let Julian approach. He didn't know why, but he felt an inexplicable pull to the woman. Her presence was calming in a way, yet there was an undeniable sense of power about her. It wasn't just her age, it was something in the way she carried herself, something that hinted at knowledge of things Julian couldn't begin to comprehend. Yes, the girl said, her voice steady. This is Julian. The older woman's eyes flicked over to Julian, and for the first time, she softened, her expression showing the slightest trace of sympathy. I know what you're going through, she said gently. And I can help. Julian was about to speak, but the woman raised her hand. No more questions. You'll understand soon enough. But first, sit down. We don't have much time. He hesitated but obeyed. He sat across from the woman, his hands gripping the edge of the chair. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about this place, the people, the strange atmosphere, was making him feel like he was part of something much bigger than he could have imagined. "You're wondering who we are, what this place is," the woman said, as though reading his thoughts. "You're asking yourself how we can help you. And I know it's hard to believe. But trust me when I say we have the means to save her." Julian's heart skipped a beat. "You know about Emily?" The woman nodded, her expression serious. "We know everything about her, about you, about the situation. But there's more to this than just her condition." "What do you mean?" Julian leaned forward, anxiety rising once more. The woman took a deep breath, her gaze drifting momentarily toward the floor. "The reason Emily is sick, why she's been suffering, isn't just because of bad luck. It's much more complicated than that. There are forces at play here, forces you don't understand. And right now, you're caught in the middle of something that goes beyond your wildest fears." Julian's pulse quickened. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The room seemed to close in on him, the weight of her words pressing down like an invisible force. "Let me show you," the woman said, and without another word, she stood, moving to a shelf and pulling down a small, ancient-looking book. She placed it on the desk in front of Julian, opening it to a page filled with strange symbols and drawings that made no sense to him. "This book has been passed down through generations," she said softly. "It holds knowledge of a power few understand. The power to heal, to change fate." Julian stared at the pages, his mind reeling. "What is this?" The older woman looked at him seriously. "This is how we're going to save your wife. But it won't be easy. There's a price to pay." Julian's mind raced as he stared at the strange symbols. Could he really trust these people? Was he about to do something that would change everything? He had no choice now. He had come too far, and there was no going back. Julian sat still, staring at the strange symbols in the book, his mind struggling to catch up with the words he'd just heard. The older woman, who still hadn't introduced herself, stood before him with a serene expression, watching him carefully, as if expecting him to ask the right question. He opened his mouth but closed it again. His mind was too clouded with doubt. Was this real? Could these people really help save Emily? And what kind of price were they talking about? The room felt colder now, the dim light casting long shadows across the walls. Julian could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Time was running out for Emily. Every second counted. And yet, he was standing here in this strange place, faced with a book filled with incomprehensible symbols and an older woman who seemed to know more than she was letting on. What do I have to do?" Julian asked, his voice strained. He wanted to be calm, but the fear for Emily's life made it hard to think clearly. "You said this book can help, but what do I need to do?" The woman's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, placing a hand on the book. Her fingers brushed over the ancient pages with a kind of reverence, as if the book were more than just a collection of words and images. It was a key, a guide to something far greater than Julian could understand. "The path to saving Emily is not simple," she said, her voice low but firm. "There are things you need to understand about the world, things that go beyond medicine or science. What you're facing now is the result of something much darker, something that has been hidden for a long time." Julian's heart raced again, and he stood up suddenly, pacing around the small, dimly lit room. "I don't care about any of that. I just want to save her. You don't know how much I love her," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Please, tell me what to do. I'll do anything." The woman watched him silently, her face unreadable. The girl who had brought Julian here stood in the corner, her arms crossed. She hadn't said much since they entered the building, and Julian wondered what she was thinking. Was she a part of this? Was she really helping him, or was this all just some kind of cruel game? You will need to make a choice, the woman finally said, her voice soft but unwavering. The book can guide us, but you must decide how far you are willing to go to save Emily. Every action has a consequence. A choice? Julian echoed, his brow furrowed. What kind of choice? The woman closed the book gently, locking eyes with him. There is a price to pay for the power we're about to summon. You must decide if you are willing to sacrifice something, perhaps something you hold dear, to save her. Some sacrifices are small, but some are much larger. Julian's throat went dry. His mind raced with possibilities. What could they mean? What could he be asked to give up? And more importantly, was this real? Was he really standing on the edge of something that could change the course of his wife's fate? You're talking about magic, aren't you? Julian asked cautiously, his voice hoarse. This book, this ritual, it's not some kind of science, is it? The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him with a kind of solemnity that made Julian's stomach turn. She knew what he was asking. She knew what was at stake. What you are facing is not magic, she said slowly, her voice steady. It is something older, something that exists beyond the understanding of most. Magic, science, they are just words. What matters is the power that exists in this world, the power that very few are aware of. And it is that power we need to tap into to save Emily. Julian shook his head, feeling a mix of confusion and frustration. This is insane. You're telling me that you have some kind of power, something supernatural, that can help her? The woman's lips twitched into a faint smile, though it was neither reassuring nor kind. Yes. But you must understand, this power comes with a cost. Julian stood there, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest like a heavy stone. His thoughts were spinning. How could this be happening? How could this be real? He had never believed in anything supernatural. But the urgency of Emily's condition, the way she had deteriorated so quickly, made him feel like he was running out of options. I don't care what it takes, Julian said suddenly, his voice filled with determination. I'll pay any price. I'll give up anything. Just tell me what to do. The woman's expression softened ever so slightly, but she didn't move. You must be careful with such promises, she warned. Not every price is one you'll be willing to pay once it's been made. You may find that what you're willing to sacrifice today might be far more than you can bear. Julian didn't care. He was willing to do anything. Anything to save Emily. She nodded once, almost as if she had been expecting this response. Very well, she said. You must follow the steps in the book. The first step is to retrieve a token, an object that holds significance. This object will serve as a conduit between you, the power, and Emily. Without it, the ritual cannot begin. A token? Julian repeated, his mind racing. What kind of token? The woman leaned in slightly, her voice low. It must be something personal. Something tied to Emily's life, something that connects her to you. Julian's thoughts immediately turned to the necklace Emily always wore. It was a delicate silver chain, with a small pendant that she had inherited from her mother. It was the only piece of jewelry she always wore, no matter what. The necklace had been passed down in her family for generations, and it had a deep sentimental value. Julian knew immediately that this was what they needed. It was the only thing he could think of that could possibly connect them. I know what to get, Julian said quickly. I'll go get it now. The woman nodded once. Good. But remember, once you begin, there is no turning back. The power we will summon will change things. It will change you. And there may be consequences you cannot foresee. Julian didn't listen to her warnings. All he could think about was Emily. The woman's cryptic words seemed like distant echoes in his mind as he turned toward the door. "Come back here when you have the token," the woman called after him. "And remember, the price will always follow." Julian made his way back through the alley, the cool night air biting at his skin. His heart pounded as he rushed to his apartment, thoughts of Emily filling every inch of his mind. The necklace. He had to get the necklace. The object that would tie her to the ritual and, according to the woman, would unlock the power needed to save her. But there was something in the back of his mind, a gnawing feeling that he couldn't quite shake. What price would he have to pay? What if the cost was more than he could bear? He reached his apartment and unlocked the door, stepping inside. The place was silent. Too silent. He could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock on the wall, but it all felt far away, as if he was detached from everything. His eyes fell on the dresser where Emily's things lay scattered, her favorite books, a few old photos, the small jewelry box she always kept on the shelf. He opened it carefully, his fingers trembling as they reached inside. There it was. The necklace. The silver chain with the small, delicate pendant. It was perfect, everything he needed. But as his fingers closed around it, a thought crossed his mind. Was this truly the answer? Was he about to embark on a path that could change everything? He had no idea what he was getting into. But one thing was clear, there was no going back now. He closed his hand around the pendant and turned to leave. The night air was thick with tension as Julian made his way back to the old building. The pendant, Emily's pendant, was tightly clutched in his hand. He could feel the cool metal against his palm, a reminder of the weight of what he was about to do. The woman had warned him, but he wasn't about to back out now. Not when Emily's life was hanging by a thread. His footsteps echoed down the dimly lit alley, each step seeming louder than the last. The city was quiet tonight, almost too quiet. As if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When Julian reached the door of the building, he hesitated. His heart pounded in his chest, and for the first time since he entered this strange world, doubt crept in. Was he doing the right thing? What if the price was too high? What if this wasn't the answer? But then he thought of Emily. The way she had looked in the hospital, so pale and fragile, her life slipping away. That thought was enough to push him forward. He couldn't lose her. He wouldn't. The door creaked open as he pushed it, and he stepped into the same dim room where he had met the woman earlier. She was still standing there, waiting for him, her eyes gleaming with an unreadable expression. The girl who had brought him here was also in the corner, her arms still crossed, watching him closely. Julian didn't waste any time. He pulled the necklace from his pocket and held it up. "I've got it," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. The pendant. The one she always wore. The woman's eyes flickered as she saw the necklace, and she nodded. "Good. Now, we can begin." She stepped forward, motioning for Julian to follow her. The room felt colder now, the shadows seeming to stretch longer across the walls. She led him to a small altar in the center of the room. There, on the surface, were several objects Julian didn't recognize: candles, a bowl filled with something dark, and what appeared to be a strange, glowing stone. "This is where it will happen," the woman said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Place the pendant here." Julian did as she instructed, placing Emily's necklace gently on the altar. His hand lingered on the smooth surface of the table for a moment, his heart racing. What was going to happen next? What had he gotten himself into? The woman nodded, then turned to the girl who had been watching them. She motioned for her to come forward. "This is where you come in," the woman said to the girl. "You will assist him in the ritual." The girl stepped forward, a look of calm determination on her face. Julian didn't understand what her role was, but he had no time to ask questions. The ritual was beginning. The woman began to chant in a language Julian didn't recognize. The words seemed to vibrate in the air around him, sending a shiver down his spine. As she spoke, the room seemed to grow colder still. The shadows in the corners of the room shifted, as if they were alive, moving in time with her words. Julian could feel the energy in the room building, a strange pressure against his chest, as if the air itself was thickening. His breath came faster now, and he fought to stay calm. The pendant on the altar began to glow, a soft, pulsing light radiating from it. "What's happening?" Julian asked, his voice shaking. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the glowing pendant. It was mesmerizing, almost as if it was pulling him in, drawing him closer to something he couldn't quite understand. "The ritual is opening a gateway," the woman said, not looking up from her chant. "The power we are invoking will connect you to Emily, but it is not without consequence. You must be ready for what comes next." Julian's mind was racing. A gateway? What did she mean? Was this truly some kind of magic? Was this how they were going to save Emily? Before he could ask another question, the room seemed to grow even darker, the shadows now reaching out like tendrils. The air grew colder still, and Julian could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His heart was beating in his throat now, pounding so loudly he could barely hear the woman's chant anymore. The girl, standing beside him, placed her hands on the altar, and the glowing stone began to pulse in time with the pendant. The energy in the room shifted again, and Julian felt a sudden pressure behind his eyes, as if something was trying to break through his mind. He staggered, his vision blurring, but he steadied himself against the altar. "What is this?" Julian gasped. "What's happening?" "This is the beginning," the woman said calmly, still chanting, her voice unwavering. "The gateway is open. But you must be strong. There is no turning back now." Suddenly, Julian felt it, a pull, sharp and intense. It was as if something was reaching out to him from beyond, something vast and ancient. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. His chest tightened, and he reached for the pendant, his fingers brushing against it. As his hand closed around the pendant, the world around him seemed to shift. The room disappeared, replaced by a vast, empty space filled with swirling shadows and light. Julian's heart raced as he realized he was no longer in the room. He was somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the physical world. The shadows seemed to reach for him, and he could hear whispers in the distance, voices he couldn't understand but felt deep within his soul. They were speaking to him, calling to him. The pressure behind his eyes intensified, and he stumbled, his knees buckling beneath him. "No," he gasped, gripping the pendant tighter. "I need to save her. I need to save Emily." The shadows seemed to respond to his words, swirling faster around him. The voices grew louder, more urgent, and for a moment, Julian couldn't tell if they were speaking to him or to someone else. The fear that had been building inside him began to boil over. This was too much. It was too powerful. He wasn't ready for this. But just as he thought he might collapse, he felt a sudden warmth in his chest, a flicker of light amid the darkness. The pendant, now glowing brighter than ever, pulsed in his hand, and the shadows around him seemed to recede. He wasn't sure what was happening, but something had shifted. The pressure lifted from his chest, and the whispers in his ears faded. The room came back into focus, and Julian found himself back in the small, dimly lit space. His knees were still weak, but he steadied himself, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The woman and the girl were still standing beside him, watching him intently. The altar was quiet now, the energy in the room no longer overwhelming, but there was a strange stillness, as if everything had changed. What was that? Julian breathed, his mind still spinning from the experience. What did I just see? The woman nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. You have touched the power, she said softly. You have made the connection. Now, the ritual is complete. But the price has been set. There is no going back. Julian's heart sank. What do you mean, the price? She looked at him, her eyes dark and knowing. Every action has its cost, Julian. You cannot expect to wield such power without consequence. His stomach churned. He had already paid a price. What more was there to lose? Emily, Julian's voice trembled. How do we save her? The woman's gaze softened, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. The path to saving Emily is not over. It has only just begun. The power you've summoned will give you a chance, but it is a fragile chance. You must be careful. The price will come for you, and it will come for her. Julian could barely comprehend what she was saying. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and hope. He had done it. He had made the connection, but at what cost? We will help you, the woman said, her voice gentler now. But remember, not every gift is freely given. The weight of the woman's words settled heavily in Julian's chest. The power he had called forth had given him a chance, just a chance, to save Emily. But at what price? The ritual had pulled him into something beyond his comprehension, beyond his control. And now, it was as if he had opened a door that couldn't be closed. The air in the room felt different, as if something ancient and unknowable had been awakened. The woman and the girl stood motionless, their eyes fixed on him. The silence between them was thick with unspoken truths. Julian could feel the pressure of their gazes, as though they were waiting for him to process what had just occurred. What do you mean by the price? Julian finally managed to ask, his voice tight, as though the words were lodged in his throat. The woman's expression remained unreadable, her face shrouded in the dim light. The power you sought is not free, Julian. Every choice you make, every path you take, comes at a cost. You have connected with something far older than you can understand. The forces you have touched are not meant for human hands. The weight of her words was suffocating. Julian felt a cold chill sweep through him, as if the room itself were rejecting him. The pendant, which had once glowed with such intensity, now seemed dim, lifeless, just a simple piece of jewelry. Yet, Julian could feel its presence, still vibrating with the power that had surged through him moments ago. You don't understand, Julian said, his voice rising in frustration. I don't care about the price. I need to save her. Emily's life is on the line. You said this would work. It's supposed to work. The woman stepped forward, her eyes softening, but there was no mistaking the caution in her movements. What you have done is dangerous, Julian. It has linked you to a power far beyond your control. And that power will come for you. Julian recoiled. What do you mean, come for me? His heart began to race again, his thoughts spinning. He had already felt the power, the raw force that had overwhelmed him during the ritual. He had touched something ancient, something dangerous. And now, it was clear, there would be consequences. He just didn't know what they were, or when they would strike. The girl, still silent, stepped forward. Her gaze was fixed on him, almost as if she could see through him. You will feel its presence, she said quietly, before long. The price is not something you can escape. You will feel it in your bones. In your soul. Julian's stomach twisted. He couldn't let fear consume him. He couldn't think about what might happen to him. His mind was already on Emily. Emily. The one person he couldn't lose. Tell me how to save her, Julian demanded, his voice raw with desperation. You said there's a chance, right? A chance to save her. Tell me how. The woman gave a small nod, her eyes flicking toward the altar where the pendant lay, still faintly glowing. There is a way, she said, her voice low. But it is a dangerous path. You must be willing to face what is coming, Julian. You cannot hide from it. And neither can Emily. What does that mean? Julian's heart skipped a beat, and he stepped forward, grasping her arm. What does Emily have to do with this? How is she involved? The woman's eyes locked with his, and for the first time, Julian saw a flicker of something, regret, perhaps, pass through her expression. Emily's fate is bound to the power you've called. The ritual was not just about connecting with the forces that could save her. It also tied her to those forces. She will feel the cost too. Julian's blood ran cold. He let go of her arm and staggered back, his mind reeling. No. No, that can't be right. She can't be part of this. She's innocent in all of this. The woman nodded slowly. Innocent, yes. But still, the forces you've summoned are not merciful. They will take from you both. What do I have to do? Julian asked, the words almost a plea. How can I stop this from happening to her? I don't care about myself. Just her. The woman seemed to consider his words for a moment before replying, her voice heavy with finality. There is one way. But it is not something you can do alone. The ritual must be completed. There must be a final sacrifice. Julian's mind screamed in protest. A sacrifice? Was she suggesting that someone had to die? Could she really be asking him to make such a choice? What kind of sacrifice, he asked, his voice shaking. The woman's gaze softened, but there was no comfort in her eyes. It is the only way to break the bond. You must offer something of yourself, something irreplaceable. What? Julian's voice cracked. What do you mean? I don't have anything left to give. The woman didn't answer immediately. She turned to the girl, who still stood quietly in the corner, watching them with an unreadable expression. Then, after a long pause, the woman spoke again. You must sacrifice the one thing that is most precious to you, she said. Your heart. Your soul. Something of your deepest attachment. Julian shook his head, refusing to believe what she was suggesting. I don't care. I will do anything to save her. I'll give anything, just tell me what to do. The woman's expression darkened. You will have to decide quickly, Julian. The window of time is closing. The forces are moving now. If you wait too long, the cost will be greater than you can imagine. Julian's heart pounded in his chest. The thought of losing Emily was unbearable. But the cost, the price of what they were asking him to do was unimaginable. Could he really make such a choice? Could he truly sacrifice the one thing he loved more than anything else in the world? I don't have a choice, he muttered, more to himself than to the woman. His thoughts were spinning out of control. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the fear in his chest, the gut-wrenching terror that came with the thought of losing Emily, was real. Too real. You have 1 hour, the woman said softly, her words cutting through his thoughts. 1 hour to decide. Then, the forces will come for you both. And when they do, there will be no turning back. Julian stared at her, his mind in a haze. 1 hour? He had only 1 hour to make the decision of his life. And whatever choice he made, there would be no going back. Julian's breath came in shallow gasps as he paced back and forth in the cold, dimly lit room. His mind was a blur of confusion and panic. He had 1 hour. 1 hour to decide if he could, and would, sacrifice the most precious thing in his life to save Emily. The weight of the woman's words, the coldness in her eyes, haunted him like a shadow he couldn't escape. He looked down at the pendant still resting in his palm. The glow was gone now, the power it had once emitted almost completely drained. And yet, he could feel something stirring inside him. A faint pulse that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. It was still there, whatever force he had called. The magic. The ancient power. It was still waiting, dormant but ready to awaken once more. But at what cost? What does it mean? Julian muttered to himself. What exactly do they want from me? There was no answer, of course. No one but the woman knew what the true cost would be. She had been vague, offering him nothing but cryptic warnings. The one thing most precious to you, she had said. Could he do it? Could he really sacrifice himself for Emily? He thought back to the day they first met. Emily had been so full of life. Her laughter had filled the empty spaces in his heart, her smile had made everything seem brighter. He remembered their first date, their first kiss, the way she had looked at him as if he were her everything. The thought of losing her, of never seeing her again, was enough to send a sharp pain through his chest. But to sacrifice the one thing he loved most? What did that even mean? Could he offer something like that? His mind kept returning to the woman's words. The forces will come for you both. If you wait too long, the cost will be greater than you can imagine. Emily's face flashed in his mind. He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. But if he chose to make the sacrifice, would it work? Would it save her? The door to the small, dimly lit room creaked open. Julian's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced, torn between the decision he had to make and the person who had walked in. Emily. She stood in the doorway, looking pale and fragile, her eyes wide with worry. She didn't look like the woman he had known, strong, vibrant, full of energy. Now, she seemed distant, a shadow of the person she once was. But even in that weakened state, there was still something in her eyes that drew him in. A quiet strength. Julian? Emily's voice was weak, her face filled with concern. What's going on? What's happening? Julian froze, caught between the torment of the moment and the love he had for her. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as if everything were pressing down on him. He had no answers to give her. He couldn't explain any of it. Not yet. I don't know, Julian said, his voice hoarse. He placed the pendant on the table, his hand trembling slightly. I don't know what's happening, Emily. But there's a way, a chance I can save you. Emily stepped forward, her brow furrowing. A chance? What do you mean? You've been acting strange for days now. I don't understand what's going on. What's happening to you? He could see the fear in her eyes. The fear of the unknown. She didn't know what he had been through, the powers he had unleashed, the deal he had made. You don't need to know, Julian said, the words coming out faster than he intended. You just need to trust me. I'm doing everything I can to save you. I'm going to make this right. Emily stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with tears. Julian. I don't understand. You're scaring me. What do you mean? What's this power? He swallowed hard, not knowing how to explain. How could he make her understand? He didn't even understand it himself. All he knew was that she was slipping away, and he had to do something. Anything. He reached out, taking her hand in his. Her skin was cold, her touch weak. She was fading. Time was running out. I made a choice, Julian said quietly, his voice trembling. A dangerous choice. And now I have to face the consequences. Emily stared at him, her grip tightening around his hand. What consequences? What are you talking about? Julian opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He didn't have the words. He didn't know how to tell her about the woman, the ritual, the sacrifice. He couldn't explain it all, not when he was so uncertain of it himself. But he knew one thing for sure. If he didn't act now, he would lose her forever. I've been told there's a way to save you, Julian said finally, looking into her eyes. But there's a cost. A sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Julian hesitated. He didn't want to say it out loud. The words sounded too cruel, too final. I have to give up something, he said quietly. Something that's more precious to me than anything else. It's the only way to break the bond. The only way to stop what's happening to you. Emily's eyes widened, her face pale. She shook her head in disbelief. You can't mean that. You can't mean you have to give up something important to save me. Julian nodded, unable to meet her gaze. I don't have a choice, Emily. I have to do this. You mean everything to me. And if it means losing a part of myself to save you, then it's what I have to do. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she stepped closer to him, her hands trembling as she cupped his face. I don't want you to do this, Julian. I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for me. I don't want to be the reason you lose something so important. But you are, Emily, Julian whispered, his voice breaking. You're the most important thing in my life. And if this is the price I have to pay to keep you in it, then I'll do it. I'll do anything for you. Emily's tears spilled over as she wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. I don't want to lose you, Julian. I don't want you to make that choice. Julian held her tightly, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. I have no choice. I love you, Emily. And I'll do whatever it takes. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier as the minutes ticked by. Every second felt like an eternity. Julian's mind screamed with doubt, with fear. Could he really go through with this? Could he sacrifice something so important to him? The woman's warning echoed in his mind, the forces will come for you both. Time was running out. He could feel the pull of the power, the pull to finish the ritual. But at what cost? I've made my choice, Julian said, his voice steady but his heart breaking. He pulled away from Emily and turned to the table where the pendant lay. He picked it up, holding it in his hand for the last time. This is the only way. I'm doing it for you. Emily gasped as he placed the pendant over his heart, a soft glow beginning to emanate from the stone. The power was responding, the ritual was almost complete. The final step was upon them. Julian, no. Emily screamed, her voice filled with desperation. Don't do this. But it was too late. The forces had already been set into motion. The light from the pendant intensified, and the room was filled with a strange, overwhelming energy. Julian's heart raced as the power surged through him, flooding his senses. The price of his choice was coming. The sacrifice was inevitable. And then, as quickly as it began, the power dissipated. The room fell silent. Emily stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear. What happened? She whispered. Julian's body trembled as he looked at her, his vision blurring. He could feel the change, something inside him had shifted. The power was gone. But so was a part of him. The price had been paid.